Innovation, disruption, and big issues. This is Business Game Changers with Sarah Westall.
Go ahead.
Yeah, take that big leap, though, and say to yourself, in my personal experience, that was true. The smartest person I knew didn't have this education. Am I mind washing my kids into a life of mediocrity? And if I had simply gotten out of the way and let them express their own nature and universe, what would they have achieved?
Yeah. There's some fear there.
There should be fear, and there's always going to be fear, yeah. And so there are things to really worry about, but I don't think whether or not they go to college, it's going to be that pertinent, especially as we go forward in the future.
Yeah, interesting.
Look at what happened here. Okay, now here's something else from my personal experience. I start a business here. I start doing these reports. I get myself into a situation where I was unprepared for bandwidth costs. I needed a big cash infusion. Jim Sinclair, the gold fellow, helped me out. And through him, I got an introduction to a Chinese guy. And this Chinese guy was a elegant gentleman, and he helped me out for a number of years. He liked my reports. I did special reports for him. He and his wife loved the weather reports being so accurate. And it saved them considerable money. So, for instance, I was able to tell them that you're going to have big floods in this particular part of Australia, and they sold their holdings there 6 weeks before it occurred, got out before all the damage, didn't have to mess with the insurance and all of that. Now, this individual, we called him Charlie Chan. He's actually a Chan Chinese, and his first name, he just said to always call him Charlie, and so I did out of respect. And he was a fellow that was a college professor. And he told me his life experience once, and in a very terribly long and expensive phone call for him. I didn't pay for it, but he told me this experience. And he was caught up in the Cultural Revolution, which is exactly what they're trying to make happen in the United States right now with all these kids in their ninja suits. And what happened to Charlie was he was a college professor. He taught mathematics, and he taught required political thought in the Chinese system. He was a full-fledged tenured professor. You know, the Chinese thought highly of him. There's a cultural revolution because Mao decided that he needed to have things changed at a political level very high up. And so he got all the kids at a particular level, his version of the millennials, come on out and have this cultural revolution, and China gets upturned on their entire course of existence for 20 plus years. And Charlie Chan goes and works for 10 years in the coal mines. Because all of the college professors, their students came in one day and arrested them all. And Charlie was a committed communist. And all of the professors in that entire institution were arrested by the students and sorted into groups. And they either got put on a truck to go work in the coal mines, most of whom died in that process, or they were sent out into the fields. Again, most of them died in that process because they were older and so on. And so the whole country was taken over. That's what they're trying to have happen at this stage with the kids in their ninja suit being paid by George Soros. It's the same legacy that's going on all over again. Many of the same drivers are there for us as existed for the Chinese. That is, the economic conditions at the time caused the Cultural Revolution, just as the economic conditions of the super debt that we've got now are causing the cultural and have caused the Cultural Revolution that has occurred in these last 40 years. And now we're seeing the anti-revolution side of it as we come to that hard stop of the dollar dying and having to put out real resources and not having them anymore, and everybody trying to live off the government, basically the government debt. Half of people are directly tied to the debt levels of the government. So when we hit this hard stop in September, it's going to be horrific. And all the people in colleges are going to really suffer. Many of them are there existing day to day on getting another turnover on their loan for, supposedly learning something that in the future might actually allow them to pay it back. But if you look at it as a return on investment, I will invest in humans. This, homeless kid shows up with this muddy dog, and I invest in him, and 10 years later, we've got a really productive society member here out earning and working and taking care of his kids and so on, right? And so I'll invest into people, but there is no return on investment for a college education. If you look at the actual numbers, the amount of interest you have to pay, and all of this, any person that was in all rational and educated in arithmetic, not even mathematics, but arithmetic, should look at these numbers and projections and run away from college as fast as they can, because it's dooming you to a life of debt slavery, never being able to pay off those debts. That's not a rational system, and that's supporting our government. No wonder our government is so mean-spirited. There's no real assets there.
Well, and they're using the wrong assets to support themselves. You don't use the investment in your people as a way to. That's just it's messed up.
Okay, no, you actually do. Let's look at our language. You use your asset is your people. A country exists only because of their people. But you want them to be. The Chinese, okay, if you can actually go and read Chinese white papers, all right? Chinese government is just cranking out these white papers like mad. And unlike the American stuff, they don't classify it. So you can go and read what the Chinese are planning. And like 15 years ago, I read this document that said the Chinese Central Authority is aware that that they exist because of the wealth, health, and happiness of the population. And if we get this wrong, we won't be here.
Well, and that's true.
And you don't hear this coming from our guys. Now, in China, they've run up into this debt situation with us and so on, and they're going to crash this summer, and that's going to cause a lot of big problems for us. But in general, their approach is a lot more practical than what we've got, because we're not even acknowledging that we don't even have a debate anymore about sound money in this country.
Well, but we have bigger issues too. When you're talking about, the happiness of the people, the investment in the people. I mean, when you look at mass incarceration, you look at our problems in our schools, you look at all the problems we have. That's a very large red flag that we are not investing in our people. We've completely abandoned it. And my point is that the debt off college students that they can never write off, we're taking it on the back of college students without caring whether that is productive or not.
Well, it's worse than that. Everybody that's a parent, as you have expressed, has been trained by our social order and media all of their lives, and probably by their own experience, to sell their children into slavery. And I refuse to laugh about that, because I know these kids.
I laugh when things are bad, because I do get that. Because freedom is having enough money and enough freedom so you don't have to do what everybody else tells you, No, excuse me.
I think so. Let's get real clear about that. Okay, that's what I call fuck you money. All right, I've got that. Okay, I work for myself. I've got that kind of money. Freedom is opportunity. Okay, if you're a debt slave, if your mind is controlled, if you've gone into debt to go to an institution that structures your thoughts, you've lost opportunity. You've lost opportunity because you're in debt. You've lost opportunity because you've gone to an institution whose whole goal is to structure your thoughts. Bear in mind, you don't get out of college by learning how to think. They don't teach you how to think. They teach you to regurgitate the thoughts of dead people exactly as they told them to you, and you matriculate. That is, you graduate in their opinion. You are them. So, examine that thought when you think about selling your child into slavery to go to an institution. Would you really like your child to be them, the people that are teaching that child and educating their mind and so on? Do you really want to hang out with these people? That's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, but there is something like with my son. He talks about being an entrepreneur all the time, because that's one of the classes I teach, entrepreneurship. I teach ethics. And I teach about free thinking and critical thought and things. And he's always thinking about and I tell him that this is probably what you want to do. When you go to college, though, you want to soak up as much knowledge on learning things, right? You need to learn. And if you have
get that out of college, though. You will never be taught
in an engineering school. Don't you in an engineering school?
No. You're taught to be by rote. You're not taught to learn how. You are never taught how to learn.
But you do get the basic skills. You get mathematics, you get...
Okay, no, I would dispute that. How many children can even come out? If you had basic mathematics, you wouldn't need to get them in college, okay? I came out of a British military school. I had the most haphazard high school education you can imagine. I was in 32 high schools before I got to the last 2 high schools, from which I finally said, okay, give me my diploma. I got out 6 months early. But here's my point. In Germany,
there's so many ways to learn. Yes.
Right. Exactly. In Germany, though, they had this thing that was called gymnasium. Okay, gymnasium. And gymnasium isn't going and playing basketball. It's where you make a decision. Am I plotting for college and academia, or am I plotting for doing something real in world engineering and so on? And what they actually do is, for a year, they teach you how to learn, so that you will be able to decide which of these 2 paths are more integral to you. We don't teach how to learn in our schools. We teach how to regurgitate what was there. So even in engineering...
you're in my class.
Well, and see, that's different. Now, here's something else. On a personal level, I've got to get on your case. Why deny the DNA expression that you take such joy out of, your entrepreneurship, in your child? How old? How old is he?
He's in college.
Oh, he's in college. Oh, so he's already warped. Okay. All right. But my point being that DNA traveled. I mean, he's not doing that because of thoughts. This is also because the DNA in him is being expressed the same way it expresses in you. So had that, and I'm just saying that, the thing in my viewpoint would be to say, damn, let's bring that out. What can you do now that will give you a little bit of a charge to keep it going? I wouldn't try and suppress it.
Well, maybe you need an intern. He's a computer science guy, and he's looking for all these things. He's trying to learn Bitcoin. He wants to go work on it. He's doing all, is so driven to write code and to do all these things. And
I can give him introductions, but he wouldn't want to work for me because I am also self-taught. So I have big holes in my knowledge, right? And so I will frequently stumble over them, and I'm prepared for dealing with that. Many people that are young are not. They expect that they'll be given things in an orderly fashion and it'll be cohesive and the context will make sense. So I can actually put him in touch with a lot of people if he wants to get into that world. It's totally open. Cryptos are there for anybody to get involved in.
Yeah, he needs an internship yet this summer.
We can chat offline on that.
Yeah, let's chat offline.
I'll give you some introductions to people, and
Yeah,
what comes of it comes of it. But certainly, I know people in the world, so yeah.
That'd be great. Well, and we need to talk about this whole entrepreneur, because I completely agree with the learning can change. I think there's other ways we can do a much better learning system. I agree with you 100% on that. I just, I'm a parent. You get scared at your kids.
Sure. But, I also analyze things really intensely, especially about myself. And I discovered how I learned. Okay. And so I can learn in 3 different ways. And then I discovered, geez, everybody learns in 3 different ways. Duh. They either learn from listening, they learn from seeing, or they learn from doing. Now, at any given time in my life, I've been aware of various different factors that made one of those paths more applicable. Many people are not. They're not self-analyzing. But if you can figure out which way they learn best, you can slot them into something that will favor that kind of learning approach. Thus, the way the Germans did it. There are a lot of people that learn best with their hands. And maybe 30 or 40 or 50% of the time they're learning, it'll be that method. But the other times, they'll learn some listening and some reading or visually. And so it's just, I find it curious that we don't analyze and take advantage of this the way that we do things, because you'll note colleges very rarely anymore do anything with learning by hands, actually doing. And in fact, it's discouraged. Well, one of the reasons it's discouraged anymore comes back to our central problem, money. Okay, we've got potholes in our roads because the federal government has to take money to provide to people on unemployment assistance and welfare because they didn't properly budget. They don't know what's going on. And by the way,
because trillions are missing.
Yeah, well,
come on,
okay.
let's face it.
Yeah, it's because the secret space program has taken $10 trillion from us, and that's only recently. I have been bled my entire life by these secret special access projects. And at the time, in 1956, I've been able to look at the Federal Register, which is this ongoing list of all the contracts and stuff they've negotiated. Every year they publish this thing called the Federal Register. Well, they publish it continuously because it's going on so much. But it lists every contract they've ever put out. In 1956, the language changed from 1955 to 1956. So in 55 sometime, they conquered anti-gravity. And from that point on, with their black secret projects, from that point on, the language changed and they were trying to exploit it. In the 70s, everything got even much more serious at that point. So the trillions of dollars have been stolen all along to support this huge back engineering effort. Now, I'm personally really pissed now that we're into a depression because I want that stuff out here because we need it.
Exactly.
And we paid for it. It's ours. I want those free energy devices. I want the little floaty triangles that I see with my night vision goggles that are going to these giant multiple mile long ships that are hovering 145 miles up above our planet. I can see these things, they can't deny it. And I'm not alone. So,
I think some of this technology is being developed organically and not being allowed to get out there because I've talked to a lot of people in different technology spheres, and there's some amazing things that are just developed organically that if they just supported that, we'd be way the heck into the future.
Right. And this is like Catherine Austin Fitts. Okay. If you ever get a chance to talk to her, have you ever interviewed her?
I haven't. I'd love to interview her.
Okay, because she's got this little meme that she has there about the money, follow the money stuff, but she's also got the other side of it, which is it can be incredibly profitable, incredibly wealth producing to not be stupid. And we're being stupid. So let's not do that anymore.
Really?
Let's not do that anymore. Right. Let's get this stuff out in the open, deal with the issues, be adults about it. Unfortunately, you've got a whole generation that is now expressing itself as spoiled little children in ninja suits running around because they've been trained that way. So you don't have a whole lot of adults in the room here for what needs to be a very deep adult discussion, because we've got to get into suffering. Yes, very serious suffering and pain and criminal acts that we must see, acknowledge, discuss, and then get beyond. We can't, we got to get beyond it one way or another, because exactly, it's an impediment to the whole species getting to this next level. And so we need rational adults to do it.
Are we going to get there? Are we going to be able to take on all these criminals at the top? Because we know the pedophile ring is a problem. We know the major corruption and the stealing. We know the human trafficking. I mean, there's just so many issues. Are we going to be able to get to it and take care of it?
I don't know if we'll take care of it, but I know we get to it this September. Okay, because here's the thing. All of that is supported by the bad money. And the bad money is dying. As the Economist magazine said, 1998, as the Rothschilds had said, we want it dead in 2018, so we can bring in a gold-backed currency. In order to get there, we have to have our crises this year, and our crises has to be at such a deep level that it exposes everything, and we're willing at a confidence level, at a personal confidence level, to no longer deal in dollars or digits that are denominated in dollars. This is a huge change. You don't understand how huge it is unless you've seen it. And I saw it in France when they went from the old franc to the new franc. It was still the franc, and it cost 2 years of chaos and a 5-for-1 swap. And it wasn't even a huge cut. But in any event, so we're going to have to deal with that this September. When that occurs, all of this stuff comes out. They won't be able to keep it hidden. But right now, they acknowledge almost 6,000 special access projects that the president doesn't know about.
Really?
That they don't tell him. It's in the Federal Register.
And is he trying to learn about it? Did you hear any?
No. I'm just simply saying that it's classified above the presidential grade.
Isn't that crazy that there's a classification above the president? I mean,
you would think if we were living in the reality they tell us about, that they show us on TV and broadcast media. No. We live in a corporatocracy, and the president is a figurehead. He's the PR flack that gets out there and takes the grief and the shit that we all dish out. And he's supposed to stand up, and then he gets a huge payoff with all kinds of bribes or whatever it is that motivates him at the end. And, a giant library in which you can suck off bazillions of dollars for whatever you want. And that's the way it works.
What is the structure of the deep state then, or of the actual power that be? There has to be some kind of, is there any kind of formal structure behind the president that is not, that we don't know about? Is there any formality to it?
Yeah, but I don't know that we recognize it as a formality in the sense of anything being written down, okay? It's probably much more of a legacy kind of a formality where someone is groomed for a particular job and they're brought in by the guy who will be dying soon or being replaced or going on, whatever, and the personalities are similar, and at the time they come on in, certain rules and heuristics of behavior are passed on to them, and their judgment has been, at that point, been vetted by the person above this guy, so that, when you bring in your replacement, the guy above you feels comfortable with it, and that's the way it works all the way up. It's very much a hierarchical system. It is not the way humans would organize themselves, all right? This is something that most people don't recognize. That there are very few anthropologists, for instance, that understand that humans are not pyramid-driven. We're not hierarchical creatures. We're natively 145 people in a tribe. Okay, once tribes get beyond 145 people, there's always contention, and it splits up into two smaller groups and goes off to grow to 145. We're tribalistic naturally. It just occurs everywhere you look in our history. And then at some point, something happens, and they come into contact with what we can basically say at this point is a functioning corporate society expressed through the white race. And so that's been the history in this planet. People with pigment in their skin, melanin, would come in contact with the white race. They would no longer become tribal. They would be forced into this pyramid structure. Now, there are some exceptions to this, okay? The exceptions themselves are quite notable because they're the Inca and the Aztecs, who had a pyramid hierarchical organizational structure that allowed vast organization in non-tribal ways. Now, at their core, they were still 145 people in small tribes that were all connected into a larger confederation, but they did have what we would think of as a federal organization. So they were very unique. That kind of stuff, and this was without contact with any outside organizations, any expression of this. So if you ask me that, we got to get into serious woo-woo. Is there something behind the president? Because see, here's the thing. All right, we're getting into the serious woo-woo because there are people that will maintain, and they'll absolutely truthfully, that is their truth. They have enough facts that they can say it is truthful, that there is a deep, probably alien origination, artificial intelligence that's ruling our planet. And then they'll have all these details that they can provide. Now, I agree with them up to a certain point, but I don't accept the idea of artificial intelligence, all right, for many different reasons, because I'm a programmer for one. but beyond that, and I work at the deep level. I've always made the machinery do stuff, the assembly language, that sort of thing. But on the other side of it, I know that there's an organization. I know that the organization that's being imposed on us is what Catherine Austin Fitts calls inhuman. I call it pyramidical as opposed to tribal, so it's not native. We can exist in it, but it chafes everybody feels it. And the larger we get, the more it chafes and so on. So I know it's not native to our DNA, and we're being forced into this. In my expectation at this point, I can say that, well, behind the president, we know there are the bankers. And behind this cadre of bankers, we know ultimately it all goes up to these people that would rather no one know their name. And that's the Rothschilds, right? And their real name is Bauer. And they're really a German Jewish family. And they don't want anybody to know that they exist. And they own as much wealth in 9 family members as 89.9% of the rest of the planet. Okay. So these are truly a strange subset of humanity. And these people control all of humanity through not just our government, but all governments through their machinations. And they've frequently been quoted saying, things like, well, I don't care who counts the votes. I want to control the money. And then I control everything, right? And so beyond that, we have that organization. But so it's my contention, though, that the organizational structure that's being imposed by the Rothschilds and the Bauers, and perhaps by some entity behind them, is not naturally, natively how we humans would organize. Now, I've been in the military and existed under that structure all of my life. I was born into it as a military brat. And it's a very much pyramidical, hierarchical, shut up, do what you're told, and so on. Yet, in the height of military expression, which is combat and war, at a personal level, especially seen in such things as infantry and Air Force, it is always tribal.
Mm-hmm. You go to your troop or your group.
You're right. Your platoon, right? Mm-hmm. And so you always come down to that smallest level. And in that group, in that platoon, you may have a situation where there is an imposed pyramidical structure. And if that pyramidical structure gets in the way of tribal survival, they get fragged. That's why so many second lieutenants died in Vietnam, because they were inculcated in the college education, a pyramidical structure, and they were intent on imposing it on people that had been in country in Nam and knew what it took to, keep the critters out of your boots and keep your anus tight and stay alive, right? And these people were not intent on keeping that tribe alive. And so the tribe, at some level, voiced or not, made a decision. Some member of the tribe elected to express that decision, and they waited for the next second lieutenant. And that's the way it works. Korea, Vietnam, World War II, it doesn't matter. Any war situation, humans revert to tribal. So I know this is a core integral belief system for us, or not belief system, but the way we operate. And you don't see that being expressed in the current social order that they're trying to drive into this huge pyramid that's global. And I think we're at that point that it's all breaking down. Now, the linguistics, the data makes me think that.
Well, I do know that in business schools and stuff, they teach teams and you teach working together in groups, and because they know the psychology of people, but those are people that are smart and thinking about it and trying to understand the true psychology of people to take advantage of it. But that's different than what they actually are doing. What people are studying and trying to get people to do is different than what they actually are doing in most cases.
We don't
Yes.
live in a very upfront, in-your-face reality. It's basically extremely duplicitous. And this is why people like me. I mean, I make jokes on Twitter is that people like me, and I have people that follow me because mostly I'm harmless and I look like Yoda.
I love talking to you. I love this.
But see, it's integrity, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's the thought and word and deed are all aligned. And if you have personal integrity, the world opens up for you. It will actually part itself. If you don't believe this, go and listen to anybody read to you Napoleon Hill's works. Think and Grow Rich, or those kind of things. And it's quite true. And what it has to do is the reason that you like talking to me is because of the sympathetic vibration that is created in you at a level in your consciousness that may also express in certain body sensations. Oh, this is cool, excitement, adrenaline, that kind of thing. But it's that consciousness that expresses it first. And so harmonious expression and integrity at a duopoly level. Both of us have our own personal integrity, and that integrity of both of us is aligned. And look how powerful that is. And see, that's kind of why I get on your case about from my view,
I know.
the poor kid. Let him find someone in a line and look what he could do. Maybe he's another Steve Jobs. Maybe he's a Bill Gates that needs to drop out of school and say to hell with that. And let's invent this.
It's more my daughter. She's the one
okay.
She's the one that's telling the whole world to go F themselves, and I don't know what to do with her.
Well, hey, there's nothing you can do with her except get out of her way and say, how can I assist you?
As long as she doesn't hurt herself.
No. Hey, you've got to do that.
just-
But you've got to do that, guys. I mean, you really, every time universe teaches us by pain and suffering and mistakes. We don't learn by getting things right or having it soft and cushy.
It's not soft and cushy for her, and she hasn't figured it out.
Well, let me talk about gender specific stuff here for a second, okay? Very difficult for women to ever get into the team sport level to the point where at a management structure they're equal to male
Tell me about it. I coached for 15 years at the highest in hockey,
and
at the top, some of the top places, and I felt that. Yeah.
And the reason that is a difference in our DNA expression based on hormones, and it'll never ever change, right? And so women have a compensatory, much more valuable ability to do a social interaction that men never will. So we're left out in that thing entirely. So you get compensated, but women are held back entrepreneurially by many different things. And so I kind of cringe inside at the thought of a woman holding her daughter back from this kind of expression, especially since that woman is also an entrepreneurial person that expresses it herself. Now,
I'm not holding her back from entrepreneurial stuff. I'm just trying to, I don't know.
Here's the thing, though. See, here's the thing. I have to come back to it, and I've got to say, at its core, you do have a very solid worry, all right? Because women that are entrepreneurial push themselves into the male world, and in doing so, they put themselves at a level of risk they're not necessarily prepared for, and that level of risk has to be expressed in the following way. And I don't mean to be mean-spirited about it, okay? But just as I have my little saying about conspiracy theory, no, you're simply underinformed, I say there is no gender equality. We don't have anything close to gender equality in our society at all. I have a very simple metric that proves this to anybody with a thinking mind. And that metric is that 88.9% of all on-the-job maimings are male. 97% of all on-the-job deaths, fatalities, are male. Until we have those numbers be close to each other, male and female, gender-wise, we don't have gender equality in this society. And this is true no matter what the situation is. Males die at an alarming rate industrially that females never experience, okay? Now, from my perspective, women going into that world need to understand this because they're dealing with people where individuals, males, where if we make a mistake on the job frequently, we can die. And most women in their jobs, if they make a mistake, well, you can talk about it over coffee. And I don't mean to minimize it, but they are not putting themselves at risk at a skin level the way that most of the male population is, or used to at some point come in contact with. So we have the illusion some of the words towards gender equality, but we're deluding ourselves. And that delusion comes through the same way it does with the illusionary money. The fake money makes us feel bad and treat each other badly. Look what's happening in Venezuela. The military now is defecting to the populace. This will happen here in the United States. It's predictable. When the powers that be can't pay all of the entitlements to everybody in the United States, they'll cut them all off, except the military. And they'll use the military to protect all the key institutions and so on. And then one day the military will say, hey, I can't give this to my wife. She can't buy food with this. And then that guy will say, screw this, I'm with them. And then it starts shattering. And so this is all predictable, and it leads to the off with the head moment. And we need not go that route. We actually, within our data sets, there is a path that I can visualize that provides a way out of this nasty situation we've got with energy, with bad money, and all of this sort of thing. But it gets back to honesty, integrity, and getting at the stuff we paid that $10 trillion for.
Well, getting at that and then starting to do that purging. We got to get the corruption and the integrity back into. There has to be enough of them, enough people with integrity in positions of influence to make a difference. You're never going to clean it totally up, but if you have all a bunch of crap, how are you going to move forward because you're so bogged down?
Yeah, here's the beauty of the whole thing, though. It's like with YouTube, right? YouTube is full of corruption at the moment with their censorship, their screwy ideas to how they're managing their business for political gains, not for promoting society, making strong humans, or even a profit, right? They're just trying to do it for political stuff. So all of that, but YouTube is it's kind of like cheap food is its own punishment, okay? YouTube censorship is its own punishment because we're all going to go away. We don't have to play with YouTube. To hell with them. And yeah, they'll have a continuing audience for their 1950s kind of stuff, and it'll all drag down, and no advertiser will want to pay for it because there's no spark, there's no sizzle, there's no contention, there's no harmony, there's no disharmony, there's no integrity battling it out with other integrity. That's some of the most engaging stuff on YouTube ever, is a legitimate debate that is allowed between the progressives and the alt-right on their own channels, fighting it out tooth and nail. And they wouldn't kill each other or anything, but they're very, very supportive of their stuff. And you'll never see YouTube allow that or monetize it or anything.
So
and look
sad.
at what they're missing. Yeah.
Well, and I want to start doing debates with science, like I want to get two sides of the climate debate and two sides of the electric universe and the other and then the vaccines, but people of integrity who really believe it, and have them debate it out. We got to flush out these flaws.
Well, I'll volunteer for two of those, okay? I'll take the side of anti-vax, and I'll also debate anytime you can arrange it. I will debate with any of the chief scientists at D-Wave Computer about what they're doing on their quantum computers.
Oh, okay, that would be good.
I think I would kick ass. I think you'd get some hellacious views out of that.
That's what I want to do, and that's like what you said. Bring two people of integrity who really believe in what they believe in, and let's fight it out, because otherwise we're not going to move forward.
Exactly.
We have to have open science debate.
Right. Otherwise, it's a religion.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's exactly. And supposedly,
and in this case, it's a religion of bad money. The government gives you bad money, and so you shut up and you do the study, and you come out with the results they tell you to come out with. It doesn't aid anybody. It's a waste of the money, and it just pollutes everything.
It's called the file drawer effect or whatever.
There's
an actual name for it. Yeah, the scientists are putting anything that doesn't come out to what they want in the file drawer.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where we end up with the idea of global warming in a time when we're actually heading into an ice age. We don't have a consensus. You've got kids that are running around going crazy because they think they'll die in their 30s, and none of it is true. And look at the distress on the planet because of, we can't say, I hate answering why questions because I don't understand the motivation for acting so stupidly and irrational. And I do understand that Catherine Austin Fitts is correct. If we stop acting stupid, we can act profitably. We can be healthy, wealthy,
and, Let's minimize the stupidity and the sky will open up.
Exactly. Yeah. Birds will sing, the path will be golden, right.
Exactly.
And of course you'll still have people out there that think Jackass is funny. But, that kind of stuff doesn't have to be the way we run our country and our planet.
Exactly. Before we're done, you have to talk about Antarctica.
Sure.
The stuff the ice that's melting, and what is the deal with that?
There is, you'll get some real woo-woo people out there that say that there was some engineering on the planet to cause that to occur. Okay, there, and I don't buy that. I think it's part of our natural process. But nonetheless, the ice is melting, and the ice is doing just as it had done. And this is a guess on my part because we don't have accurate records. If we had anything close to accurate records, I could give you a better timeline of this because I think it could be analyzed. But somewhere between 17,000 years ago and 45,000 years ago, we had a condition that is the reverse of what we've got here. And ice that was on the South Pole, which is really at the magnetic South Pole, was off floating. And so all the ice was off there floating. The reason we have ice on the water like we have at the North Pole, the reason the salt water freezes has nothing to do with the lack of sunlight hitting or the sunlight hitting at an oblique angle and not heating up the ground. If you've ever been in Alaska and seen the strawberries you can grow there, I lived there as a kid, and you see strawberries and stuff that are huge. You get
really?
You get 12 hours a day of sunlight on the early spring for your gardens, you're going to go crazy. And think of this, in summer, you've got 24 hours a day of sunlight. So why do we have freezing? It has to do with the magnetic of the poles drawing down ionized particles from space that basically, and this is a crude way to think about it, but they push away the atmosphere and bring in the cold of space. And that's what causes salt water to freeze. If you're not a scientist, salt water does not freeze well. Take some water out of the ocean and try and freeze an ice cube out of it. And anyway, so the South Pole used to have ice floating there as well, not on the continent. And that's why we have all these maps that show the continent of Antarctica with no ice on it. Something occurred, and as I say, about that period of time, and the ice shifted a bit. And we saw the effect with the creation of new glaciers on North America at the same time that Antarctica froze. Whatever the mechanism, it is now reversed. And so the South Pole's ice is now forming in the water off of Antarctica. So that part of Antarctica that is on the Weddell Sea and on that side, the eastern, I think they call it, portion of the mountain area is 100% free of ice, as I'm told, and the ice is retreating in a vast amount on the other part of Antarctica, releasing all kinds of information and employment as well. When we checked in September, I was able to find easily 904 jobs with a very simple search for a very specific category of employment in Antarctica. The last time I ran that, it was over 2,300 jobs.
Wow.
So, and this is getting into
is this
their
all military?
winter. No, none of this is all commercial. This is all commercial.
Oh,
none of this
okay.
is military. You have to be vetted by the military in the United States to go down there, okay? And the vetting does not seem to care if you're a felon. So I happen to know a guy who was a convicted felon that was a biker, but he's a really good welder, and he's got work, and off he goes. So that doesn't appear to be an issue there, but they do vet you for some reason. They need to know you're there. But in any event, no, it's all commercial. Just look for jobs in Antarctica.
What are they doing down there? What are these jobs? What's the work?
Okay, the work is everything from nuclear engineering technicians, meaning energy plants, not radiation for X-rays or anything like that, but it also includes cooks and basically cooks, bottle washers. They're building out an infrastructure there. They're building out an infrastructure big enough that they need people to run pipe burying machines. Okay, so they're going to be building pipes. They're actually able to put them under something that, other than ice, because they're trying to hire people to run excavators for the intent purpose of running around burying pipes. So they're digging into the dirt.
Building a city, maybe too. They're building a.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Huh.
No, we don't know, but we also know that that never before in all of Antarctica's history, or of our modern civilization in our Antarctica, has there been so much in the way of imports, in the way of food and even things like video games and stuff, TVs and all this kind of crap, because they got to keep these people entertained now that they're there year round. And you also now have a different cadre of people. You've got the guy who's a cook. All right. He's not a scientist who happens to cook, and therefore he was made the cook on this particular shift while he does his science work on other shifts. All right. That's the way it used to be, that you had such a reduced population. Everybody did 2 or 3 jobs like a small town. Now they've actually got people that expect to go off of shift and not go do something else, but be able to kick back and play video games or watch movies or whatever. And so we actually, one of the reasons that I'm aware of all of this is that some of my old professions, running satellite uplinks and coordinating all of that kind of stuff, are now being sought after, because they're apparently going to be establishing big level satellite-based internet access. Probably not for you and I, but nonetheless. So very intriguing. And the population is growing leaps and bounds down there.
So now it's all melting. What is the temperature base? Is it like...
The reason that they're saying that the melting is occurring, from what I'm able to determine, is twofold, or threefold if you look at it. One is the volcanic action in Antarctica has always maintained a huge caverns under the ice. All the rivers have been running at 60 to 70 degrees temperature in Antarctica all this time that it's been ice covered. So that's always been the case. Now apparently it's accelerated enough to where there's actually warm water lakes in the surface of Antarctica to where it might be chilly, but 50 degrees, but you're not going to freeze instantly. And it's really pristine, pure water. That's another thing. You've got a lot of water scientists going down there that are not oceanographic. They're freshwater scientists that they're trying to recruit. So there's something that they're interested in that regard. So just looking at the categories of what they're after gives you thoughts as, what's that? What's this? Why are they concerned with this?
Are there archaeologists going down there?
There are, but those are not advertised, okay? We know that there are archaeologists going down there. We know that this is the case because of the number of posted, tenured field archaeologist guys, your Indiana Jones type, not the guy who stood up and lectured, but the guy who dug out in the dirt. Just if you check into it, you'll see that there's about 12,000 of them that are not reporting worldwide to the universities that they used to report to, and that this has been growing and growing and growing and growing and growing since about 2003.
You're kidding me. That's a huge number. And that's a huge number. And we think they're down in Antarctica. We know where. We know that some of them are working for companies who only have a presence in Antarctica. Okay. We also know that some of the universities to which these people through which they are nominally paid are reporting that these are off on extended Antarctica research. They did a lot of that in the period of time from 2003 to about 2008 or 9. Thereafter, they started losing the word Antarctica in any of this, and they would say Southern Ocean based or Southern region based, that kind of thing. And they started distributing. So is that the words you're seeing?
Correct. And so you follow the language, right? Just the way Catherine Austin Fitts follows the money, I follow the language. Hers is probably a lot easier work than mine because the ambiguity of the language is a lot more than the ambiguity of money. But so if you can track this stuff, you see that there is something going on. The 12,000 scientists, I had tumbled to this change in the language and these people being missing in like 2005 or 2006 without understanding what I was actually looking at. And then I came across this British fellow, and I'm trying to think of his name now, maybe it'll come back to me, who had done some research. And it was because a cousin of his was an anthropologist, a female anthropologist at a university somewhere in northern England or Scotland, and has apparently accepted one of these jobs and went missing from her family, which is basically him and this other guy. And it may be a situation from his understanding that she simply told them that she had no family because he's not able to get any information beyond what the school will tell him. The school knows that they were associated, that they're that he's a relative. But when he contacts her employer now, she's on an extended hiatus, not a sabbatical, and she's been gone almost 10 years at this point. So he knows she's still alive because he apparently gets letters from her occasionally, and she's told him she can't tell him where she's at. So very intriguing. Wow. And he was the one who said. Intriguing. Well, he was the one who said to himself, he's probably in his 30s, and he was saying, okay, if this has happened to her, maybe it's happened to other people. And coincidentally, when he did this and provided some of the data through this particular forum that I won't mention, I analyzed the data, and they're being moved. These jobs are showing up based on, or these people are being shown up here based on the jobs that they used to do. All of them have, whether they were hired that way or not. Some of them are mechanical engineers. One guy was really into clay. Okay, he was some kind of a scientist for clay, for artwork, that kind of thing, ceramics, not clay in a hillside. But he had clay in a hillside geology experience. So it's just really interesting, all of this stuff. And as far as we can tell, I think there's enough Antarctica references in the period of time from 2003 to 2008 to presuppose that continuing trend should have more Antarctica references if they weren't being censored out.
That'd just be fascinating. Now, we can't see what's going on because the satellites are all whited out, aren't they?
No, not precisely. Okay, they're out of date. They're out of date. Okay, Google Earth does provide stuff. Google Earth does censor what they show in Antarctica, huge areas that they just don't show. And I'm talking areas the size of Texas, that kind of thing, right? So they're giant areas. mostly around the middle portion of the country, or the continent. But if you go to Google Earth and some of these other Google Earth analogs that NASA runs, you can actually get a very good detailed image of what's going on around the coastline. Now, mostly it's uninteresting stuff, unless you want to count the number of giant deuce and a half, 2.5 ton semi-trucks that are there. Unless you want to count the number of semi-trucks, the number of buildings, the number of small vehicles, and just to get an estimation, and you start looking and you think, well, wait a second. I can look on the satellite and I know that this building here is at least this big because there's a truck I recognize, and I know that that truck is 21 feet long. And so I know this building is 120 feet long and it appears to be 5 stories. And if it were residential, how many people could we get in there? And oh yes, look, here's a huge depot of food over here. Why, this whole little complex, this little tiny complex, they've got to have 5,000 people living there. And you see these complexes all along the coast, except in the area that the Nazis claimed as New Schwabenland. That area is 100% grayed out all the way to the water and even beyond. Wow. by Google. Okay, so any area that the Nazis had claimed in the 40s, you can't see anything in. Curious, you know.
Now, does your data set say anything about that stuff coming out where they're going to start sharing it?
Mm-hmm.
When is that
wasn't that they were going to share it. What we had in the data sets a long time ago was this weirdness that basically I wrote up as the flying space Nazi economy breaks out. And in the data, it was brief, it was specific, it was very focused, it grew for maybe a year, and then it sort of faded off. And it was talking about a situation in which the ice would move, and it would cause all these people that are living underneath the ice to get the hell out. And they would come out in UFOs and a giant flying built-up infrastructure economy kind of thing that has been hidden from us in the Antarctic ice. Now, maybe that would have occurred if our guys hadn't done something. There's rumors in the woo-woo world that there's an active war going on, and that this active war involves let's just say Western troops in general, Western soldiers in Antarctica fighting against at this stage, we'll say we don't know who they are, whether they're Nazis or space aliens or who, but there's rumors out in the woo-woo world that are semi-credible, I mean, in that particular environment, that would suggest that there's some level of activity going on. The particulars we can just disregard. But so since about 2003 or 2004, there have been increasing amounts of rumors and chatter about some kind of conflict going on there that apparently ended or was resolved one way or another, 2012, 2013. And hey, it's been good for business from that point on.
Yeah, because there was a sudden shift. And did that coincide, you think, with an end of some kind of fighting or more with the melting of the ice?
No, I think it was the former. I think it was some kind of fighting that let's just say the corporate world became victorious. Now, maybe we had a situation that would have come out the way the data had suggested, and if we hadn't done this, if there'd been no corporate interest in Antarctica, maybe, this is entirely speculation, maybe we would have had the ice shift and the Nazis would have come out. But now we're in a particular world where perhaps it occurred that in 2002 or 2003 we discovered the Nazis, there was a big fight, now we own the place.
Interesting. It's so interesting. I would love to see what's down there.
Same here. Well, hey, we're not alone.
Heck?
Well, guess what? His best buddy just gets elected president, and what do you do when your best buddy's elected president? Why, you're Newt Gingrich. You go to Antarctica to paddle your kayak in the water.
That's
I don't think he would.
Who went down there to kayak?
Newt Gingrich.
Oh.
And so he was like the analog of John Kerry. John Kerry goes down there on the day of the election for his party's most important election ever, and he's not there. He's down looking at the ice. Well, Newt Gingrich, after he's in that new position of power, the very next day he goes down to look at the ice. I don't think they're looking at the ice.
No, that's why I want to look at the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
Send me down to look at the ice.
Yeah. Well, and bring some of it back with you. Show us a little bit, you know?
Exactly.
But
well,
no,
and
it's
you have that
entirely controlled, so, you know.
Well, yeah, and you have that picture, right? I remember you talking about.
Yes, I do. And also, we have another aspect of this that's really interesting. Just turns out that north of me is this place called Joint Base Lewis McChord. And there used to be the Army base of Fort Lewis and the Air Force Base, McChord Air Force Base. McChord Air Force Base is the staging area for cold weather flights to Antarctica. And they also handle Alaska, which makes sense. You got people that have expertise in this. Well, a lot of those crews are no longer coming back or originating out of here. They're getting so much work down in Antarctica, they're keeping them there for a while. And so we used to see huge C-130s flying, getting all set up and flying to the south for the Antarctica runs and stuff. They're not doing that stuff anymore. It's gotten so big that now the main staging places are evolving into Patagonia, where they can really keep control on it, Australia, some of the military bases and areas there, and now they're starting to branch out into New Zealand. I happen to know this, and I won't say why, but there's been a recent purchase of property with the intention of building a logistics center for Southern Ocean exploration. And that was the official reason on it, and it is huge. It is giant. And so in the next few months, we'll hear about this coming out of New Zealand as they get ready for this. Now, how soon
are they mining resources? I mean, it seems like they're doing a lot of taking advantage of resources.
In Antarctica?
Yeah.
Okay, well, one would suppose that might be the case, okay? There's movies that came out in the 70s that you can still see that were United States infantry and Air Force films. And in one of the films, they show a mountain of pure coal, hard anthracite coal, that is bigger, about the size of Mount Kilimanjaro, okay? Big mountain, only a little bit truncated. And it's right on the surface. So you don't even have to mine it. You can just go on up there with your machines and just pull the stuff off. But the thing I look at is who's down there. So I went and looked. You don't have a whole lot of mining companies down in Antarctica. In fact, I can't find one. You don't have a whole lot of oil companies down in there directly. Okay, there's a lot of oil companies that are doing things down in Antarctica in the Antarctic support systems from their logistics arms. Okay, they're not down there doing oil exploration. You don't see oil exploration companies down there. Who do we see down there? Well, guess what? If we look at the corporate maps of the United States, we see some interesting things. We see the company that was at the heart of all of the UFO stuff in the 40s and the 50s, SAIC, okay? No matter what you hear, JPL, any of these other firms you hear mentioned, at the core, SAIC, the Science Corporation, was the place from which all the orders originated, and everything else was periphery. Even though they may be doing work at JPL and some of these other places and huge things, it was coordinated out of SAIC. Well, that company got into all kinds of business over the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and into the year 2000. Around 1997 or 98, something occurred, and then just into the 2000s, that company split itself up. It took its central core that had been in existence, the UFO core, the woo-woo core, we might say, of all these weird scientists and stuff, and it rebranded that as Leidos, Leidos. The rest of SAIC is still off doing all of its stuff. Leidos was all of those people that knew how to get government contracts, to work them effectively, to do all this deep research. These are the people that managed the money going into Area 51 and some of these places, right? And they were the ones in charge of getting production out of it. What are they doing now? Leidos has only one focus, Antarctica.
Wow. So it gives you some huge indication. We're going to see what Catherine Austin Fitts says. She's following the money. How much money is going down to Antarctica, and whose money?
There's the thing. I can count the number of trucks, and I can tell you how much the capital investment is in this particular section of Antarctic coastline or this other section. I can count the boats. Boats I know real well. I can tell you the kind of cargoes that are being carried. A lot of them are bulk cargo carriers. You see the TEUs, the container ships, but a lot of these guys are bulk cargo carriers. So they're getting in stuff that won't fit in containers. So there's really some interesting activity going down there. And you can see the billions and billions of dollars of equipment just sitting around the coast in photos that we know are 6 and 7 and 10 years old. So what's it like now?
Well, yeah, if that was 10 years ago. Fascinating.
Gotten some hints off of NASA, but their system is so convoluted, I'm not able to track it that easily. But that would be the place to go because they actually get better satellite. Well, they're in charge of all the satellite photography, and they basically give it to Google anyway. So they would be the first place to see. but something is really going on. Our trillions of dollars are certainly being missing and being put into a hole in the ground.
And that's serious, though.
But a lot of them are also being spent in Antarctica. And see, this is our way out. We face our species faces an energy crisis. Now costs us, basically, we're getting down to where it costs us almost 1-to-1 for oil. It almost takes an entire barrel of oil to get a barrel out. We won't survive because we need the energy, right? So in order to get beyond this, we have to release these woo-woo sciences. the free energy devices, the UFOs, the anti-gravity, all of those things, the T. Townsend Brown work, everything needs to come on out. And then we will have exactly what you were talking about at the first part of our conversation, which is this combinoric effect of invention going on. The way that all these minds say, oh, well, I can take that and that and put them together. And look what I got. And then I take what you've got and I make this and so on. And it just goes and goes and goes.
That's the Renaissance. That's
Correct.
Our new Renaissance.
Correct.
Which we need to talk about. We didn't even get into half the stuff I had on my list. So we'll have you back. I want to talk about the Renaissance and all this stuff, but we got to wrap this up. But this was fabulous. Thank you so much, and I'll have you back, and I'll talk to you about the debate. Okay. That's something I'm serious about getting going.
And the D-Wave guys are absolutely, I think the D-Wave computer scientists are totally oblivious to what they're creating in the way of side effects. And so
that's something I got to look into too. I mean, you got to come on a show and just talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an amazing thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Well, you have an amazing day, and thank you so much for coming.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. It's been very nice.
Yeah.
Integrity and harmonious, and off we go.
It's great.